What is your definition of racism? That's a question that has always been a bit of a bother to me, especially when I listen to the narratives, the rhetoric surrounding the American discussion around race. A lot of the time when you hear people in the United States, when they're talking about racism, you hear the talk that black people cannot be racist. And when I hear that, I am perplexed. I'm confused because I come from the Caribbean, where I'm very much aware that black people can be racist, at least from my definition and understanding of racism. But the problem here is I am using the older, more typical definition of racism, where it is that discrimination, bias, bad treatment of someone based on their race. So you have that belief that you are better than someone based on their race. However, in the United States, especially in what we might consider more woke circles, there's a definition that says one must have power and privilege in order to be racist. You see, in order for racism to actually occur, the race that is being racist against the other must have some kind of systemic institutional power. And that's how racism actually happens. So, in their understanding of it, then the white race has the institutional power and privilege, so they can be racist against the blacks and the other minorities, but that cannot work vice versa. So, reverse racism isn't a thing. Now, if you're finding that definition a little confusing, that definition actually has some roots in Marxism. And yeah, we're going down that line a little bit. Don't worry, we aren't going to get too lost in the weeds there. But the general idea is it's taking a bit of understanding from Marxism, where Marxism, the idea was that fight among the classes, where the working class people may be fighting with the higher classes than them who are oppressing them. And you have a right to dislike your oppressors. And if your oppressor dislikes you, then that is some kind of real discrimination because they have power. And then in modern times now, there's a bit of racial studies where they have replaced that oppressive class and underclass inside of the Marxist school of thought and replace that with races, where the black race is the oppressed race and the white race is the oppressive race. So if you dislike them, that may be considered reverse racism, which isn't actually racism. Now, I understand what they are trying to say, as I just explained with the Marxism business. I understand what they are trying to say. I understand that in history there may be some shades of truth to that, but I think we're going down some unwise roads when we redefine or attempt to redefine racism, because that kind of racism that doesn't even work in the American context only certainly doesn't work when we look at it in a broader Caribbean context and even further than that. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how this idea of racism is a little different when we look at it in the Caribbean. And one of the stories that we're talking about in regards to that is that clash between the American understanding of racism and a bit of the Caribbean understanding of it, where in New York there was some bacchanal brewing between the Attorney General of New York and Guyana. Not the Attorney General of Guyana, the ruling party of Guyana, as in the government of Guyana, where there were some accusations of racism. Where exactly she got it from, we'd be looking into that and leaning on that even inside of the American context. Further than that, we'll be moving over to Jamaica also, where there was recently a bit of racial brouhaha. I like that word. A bit of a racial toss-up there, and we'll see the direction that racism seems to point in the Caribbean sometimes, and see if that's reverse racism, if racism cannot exist in that context here in the Caribbean, or if racism is just more complex a thing than some people in modern times would like to paint it to be. Before we dive into those stories, please do hit that like button. It does help. Drop a comment if you have something to say. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not yet subscribed, and you can hit the notification bell. It does help, so whenever a new video drops, you'll be first to know. Hit that like button. Yes, we'll give you 1 second to do that. Yeah, you did? Good. All right, we're moving in now. New York Attorney General, who irked government here, projected to win election. So if you're wondering what business the Caribbean might have with the US midterm elections of all things, well, you're seeing some of it here. New York Attorney General Letitia James, who drew the ire of the PPPC government over recent statements, is the projected winner of the contest for her post in yesterday's U.S. midterm elections. With 79% of the votes in, she has 55.3%, so she looks like she's going to win. Now, that isn't very surprising because that is New York, and New York is by and large a Democrat stronghold, which is a bit shaky in this present midterm, because in this specific midterm, New York had quite a bit of a shifting, although it wasn't enough to shift like the major races, so I don't think the Attorney General would switch to Republican. But either way, this same Attorney General, who recently it seems like would have been winning this battle over for her elections, she is the one who made some statements against racism in Guyana that drew the ire of their leadership, that drew the ire of their government, because their government was of the view that she didn't know what she was talking about. New York Attorney General concerned that complaints of racism, discrimination here. This is the article where she originally said her statements there that did upset the Guyanese government. She will raise this with Biden administration. New York Attorney General Letitia James on Sunday, that's a while ago, that's at the beginning of November, told the Guyanese Diaspora Forum in New York that she was concerned about the reports of racism and discrimination in Guyana and will draw this to the attention of fellow attorneys general and the Biden administration so that matters could be addressed. Saying that she was perturbed by allegations made during a town hall style meeting, the attorney general said she is joining her Democratic colleague, United States Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, who earlier this year criticized the PPPC government about racism and marginalization of Afro-Guyanese. The PPC government has accused its detractors of not making credible complaints or providing specifics. James was among a number of officials at the meeting organized by the Caribbean Guyana Institute for Democracy. So it's a Guyanese institute over there in New York, and there were some activists from the Guyanese opposition party. They made some accusations against the Guyanese ruling party, and if you are a Trinidadian, you may be familiar with that divide over there in Guyana, because the divide in Guyana is similar to the divide we have here in Trinidad and Tobago, where there's that Indian and African, Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese split over there, and the split is mirrored also to some extent on party lines, on political party lines, and right now the party in charge is the Indian leaning, Indo-Guyanese leaning party. So the opposition has accusations being leveled against the government about racism, and they're pulling into these accusations some foreigners, some Americans. And the thing is, in several articles, they mention that too. There's a part in that where the Democrats over in the United States, they are aware that a serious part of their stronghold in politics, a serious part of where the Democrats gain their votes from, is from the minority, the immigrant, the black population. So they want to make sure that they're always kind of on the side, or seemingly on the side, especially of immigrants and blacks, or immigrant blacks even more so. So they went into this town hall style meeting and took the word of some opposition activists that there's some racism going on in Guyana, and they said that they're promising to look into it. She spoke after hearing from retired Assistant Commissioner of Police Paul Slow, APNU and AFC parliamentarian Ganesh Mahipal, and accountant Nigel Hines, who in recent times have leveled allegations of racism and discrimination against the government. We believe that discrimination should be called out. We believe that racism should be called out. We try to call out class struggles as well. And so all that I have to say is the following, is that I will again, along with my Democrat attorney generals across the country, will be calling upon the Department of Justice as well as the Biden administration to look into allegations that have been put forward this evening, she told the audience. We are obviously concerned about any destabilizing force in Guyana, and clearly all of the allegations that have been made this evening suggests that there are problems and that they need to be looked at. They need to be examined, and that we cannot ignore it. We can't put blinders on when people are struggling. She further said that people have African ancestry should not be treated like second class and third class citizens, not this country and not in any country. And those were the similar sentiments expressed by Jeffries, another one of the Democrat elected candidates over there in the United States. And I think they are charging into a situation in the Caribbean with American blinkers on. They're looking at this in the American context where you're leaning in on the African side of this discussion, but this is Guyana where there is not an even mix but relatively balanced mix of both Afro and Indo-Guyanese. The Afro-majority Guyanese party was in charge of Guyana for some while. And bear in mind that a lot of this talk and a lot of the conversation here comes from the Guyanese elections back in 2020, where there was quite a bit of confusion as to who the real winner was. And it might be said, according to who you ask, and this seems to be the going narrative that seems to be lining up with reality, seems to be, I don't know for sure, but it seems to be that government, the Afro-leaning Guyanese government, was voted out in the 2020 elections and tried as best as they can to remain in power, remaining there, I believe, for 5 extra months. Now, that's kind of ironic, seeing that in the United States, the Democrat Party is really on a bit of a tirade criticizing people who kind of stand against election results. You know, the election deniers, calling Donald Trump from the previous administration, calling him that very same thing, saying that his big lie where he was saying the elections were stolen, etc., was a reason behind democracy failing in the United States. And here they are putting themselves, their words, their power, their political power behind a group who have accusations of not listening to election results also. And it seems like they're doing that mostly off the basis of racial solidarity. That would not work over in Guyana. Over in Guyana, saying that, you know, we are saying this and taking up the word of our African brothers, that isn't going to hold enough weight in a country like Guyana. Because it's not something where the people who are ruling the Indo-based party, it's not like they were the colonial heads, it's not like they were colonists from before that have the power and privilege. So that racism that you're talking about, the biasness in this society, who is causing it? Isn't this just a kind of equal fight up there? So to put yourself on one side based on racial heritage in a country that doesn't belong to you is buying into the American kind of understanding of racial grievances without understanding the Caribbean reality of it. The opponent for Attorney General up there in New York seemed like he caught a bit of the drift of what was going on there, and he actually called out Miss Letitia James over her support there. New York Attorney General candidate slams Letitia James for cozying up to wanted man Rickford Burke. Candidate for Attorney General of New York Michael Henry, in a press statement today, slammed incumbent Attorney General Letitia James for cozying up to New York-based APNU AFC activist Rickford Burke, who is wanted for questioning by the Guyana police force on matters relating to inciting public terrorism and racism. Isn't that ironic? The man they're listening to about his complaints about Guyana and their racism is being accused by the Guyana police force of racism himself. It is disgraceful. This is the opponent to Letitia James in New York there, saying it is disgraceful that Letitia James would embrace a wanted criminal who calls for racial violence against ethnic minorities here in New York. Violence against political opponents has no place here, period, said Henry. Letitia James should apologize immediately to the South Asian and Caribbean communities and all decent people here in New York for elevating and embracing someone who encourages violence on our streets. Now, that's a bit of the irony there, even more so, because the Indo population, when they go over to the United States, would be considered South Asian minorities. So racism against Indians in the Caribbean context, while that may be in countries like Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, That's a kind of understood regular schism where you have the rearing of the ugly head of racism between the Afros and the Indos in these countries. But when that goes over to the United States, if you are racial against an Indian person, then you are racial against the South Asian minority. So the accusation from the opponent to Letitia James in New York is that this pro-Afro Guyanese has been racial against Indo-Guyanese. So now he's racial against the South Asian minorities in the United States. It's just kind of funny to me looking at the US and their positioning of their understanding of race over the Caribbean realities. It's just kind of strange to me. And all of this is still even different, a lot different than an incident I saw over in Jamaica not too long ago. Golding won't be prime minister because of his color. Warmington. The Jamaica Labour Party's Area Council 2 Chairman Everald Warmington has asserted that opposition leader Mark Golding will never become Prime Minister of Jamaica because of his skin color. Now, you may be hearing this and wondering what is going on here. What does he mean because of his skin color? How does someone see something like that in the international public? Well, the thing is, he's talking about a Caucasian man. Speaking at the St. Catherine Northeastern Constituency Conference on Sunday evening, Warmington painted the Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party as unbeatable. This is quoting from Mr. Warmington here. Them used to say, my leader born here. Siaga born a Boston because of accident. Where Mark Golding mother and father come from? So the Siaga he's talking about was a former JLP leader who was also a Caucasian man, and he's saying that the opposition then used to, well, not the opposition, their opponents then used to speak ill of their leader, Siaga, speaking about he not being Jamaican, him not actually being from Jamaica, and not truly being Jamaican. So he was using that as his excuse to, continue along that line. Warmington questioned to loud shouts of shower labor rights. Warmington continued, so don't talk, say my leader Bornia, and you attack Siaga, and you don't attack this leader. If he wants to be prime minister, go back at England, Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, but him now beat Michael Andrew Holness. I don't talk about color and race, but they started it. So let me finish it. Them say Siaga born up there so, but where fi them leader come from? Bakra Master. Alright. He's basically saying that because the man has white skin, because the man has Caucasian heritage, that he cannot be a leader, he cannot be a prime minister in Jamaica. He is saying it in those clear words. No mincing of words there. Now, granted, there has been quite a bit of backlash because of this, as would be expected. But the man seems unfazed, to be very honest, by the backlash. NIA wants Warmington to resign or be demoted after skin color comments. Principal Director of National Integrity Action, Professor Trevor Monroe, says Government Minister Everald Warmington should be asked to resign or at least be demoted for his utterances about the skin color of opposition leader Mark Golding. Now, bear in mind, it wasn't only that organization. Several other organizations joined in criticizing his statements. Now, the man himself, in a response to the Gleaner on Thursday, Mr. Warmington, dismissed the PSOJ, that's the private sector organization of Jamaica over there, dismissed them and the Office of the Political Ombudsman, which is the office in charge of investigating his statement. He dismissed them as sanctimonious non-entities. So this man is not very apologetic. Now, I believe he said he isn't even running again for political office, so he could say what he wants. Now, I think that still stands a chance of losing your political party some mileage, but he is standing with his statements. He isn't bothered. Now, his actual party seems to be actually distancing themselves a bit from it. Now, I find this very interesting. Take a listen to this. The Jamaica Labour Party, in response to the mounting criticisms of Everald Warmington's comments, said the utterance, does not reflect the inclusive nature of the party. General Secretary, listen to this name, Dr. Horace Chang, said Mr. Warmington's comment was not meant to divide or chastise any ethnic group, but was a political comment in response to some comments that were made before. Dr. Chang admitted that Mr. Warmington's comment was unfortunate, adding that there are no ethnic divisions in Jamaica in the political arena. Now, I just find it interesting that the general secretary of the party that this man is coming from is named Dr. Horace Chang. Just an interesting note in this, but they have distanced themselves from the comment, even though I find that to not be distance enough. I think, though, that if we're being honest, the reaction to a statement like this is a lot less because it was made towards a white person. I think so. I think that's a big reason why the reactions aren't as severe. But if we're looking at it in the Caribbean context, would you consider a statement like that to be racist? Even though it's coming from a black man of African ancestry, and he's saying it towards a white man of European ancestry, would that be racism in the Caribbean context? Because in Jamaica, it's a black man who is the prime minister of the country. This man who is saying that in regards to saying that you will never attain this power. So you'd be hard pressed to say that you're making a statement like this from a position of less power and less privilege. So even in your power and privilege definition, would you consider something like that racism? And in the context of the Caribbean, how do you see racism? It's interesting. It is. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think. That's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. And drop a comment telling me what you think about the understanding of the interaction between races and the difference in countries like the United States, and then the difference in countries in the Caribbean, and the difference between the interaction of races, as in the Indians and Africans in the Caribbean, and the reactions, the interactions of even Caucasians and other minority. Well, they won't be minority in the Caribbean, there will be majority groups in the Caribbean, but other racial groups in the Caribbean. How do you see racism in these areas? Is it as simple as some like to make it seem? Is reverse racism a thing? Can a black person be racist, or can they not? Drop a comment, tell me what you think, and I will see you in the next video.